and welcome. I'm Dr. Jenn, and I'm with Aging Advantage, and I'm so glad you are able to be here with us today. This is a space where we come together to talk about all the things that matter the most to us as we move through our different seasons of life. And today we are going to talk about something deeply personal, something that touches every single one of us, no matter our age or our circumstances. We're going to be talking about purpose. So let me ask you something before we begin. What gives your life meaning today? And I want you to kind of take a moment and pause and really think about that. Maybe for some people, like it's their family. It could be a hobby that you love. It could also be, your work or something that you volunteer, something that you do. For a lot of people though, maybe you're just not really quite sure anymore. Like you used to know, when you worked full time or something, you used to know like something, was maybe more your identity, but now as you've aged, or you've moved or relationships have changed, etc., you might kind of be in a place where you're just like, I'm not quite sure anymore. And again, that's okay. So it's more than okay. I just want you to know that. So again, life is going to bring change. It always has, and it always will. And again, retirement, loss, illness, isolation, etc., are definitely things that many of us face. And if we haven't faced every single one of those things yet, at some point we will, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, people can face all kinds of different things like that and try to navigate them all at one time. And it can be really quite overwhelming. And so, whatever you're feeling right now, whether it's contentment, you're good, you're confused, or you're even kind of in this like quiet kind of grief for the life that you used to have, and now you're kind of stuck here. I want you to hear this with clarity. You're not alone. Please know that. So over the next 30 minutes, or so, we're going to be exploring why purpose matters so much for our health and for our own happiness. And we'll talk about rediscovering joy and identity, kind of walk through also some small practical steps that we can have and that we can do every day in our lives to be closer to having a more meaningful life and more purposeful life. And we'll look also too at some of the resources and community efforts and community types of events and ways that you can plug in here, right here in our area, and just ready to welcome you. So settle in and get comfortable. And, let's begin the journey. So, again, I'm Dr. Jenn with Aging Advantage, and we are a not-for-profit here in the St. Louis area, and we also support the surrounding area as well. And we really help to partner with different organizations from an educational standpoint. And it allows us, then through like grant funding and donations, et cetera, to be able to provide educational opportunities to allow you all to move through, housing insecurities, food issues, also, isolation issues. And, really help promote more like self-reliance and resilience, again, confidence, and just really help get you back out there and get you living, a life that you're happy about, again, that you feel engaged with. And that's purposeful and meaningful and flowing, and smooth and calm and peaceful, but fun, and engaged for all of you. So again, today's topic is really kind of a neat one. And it's, again, something that I think, a lot of us just kind of get stuck in the rut of, our daily lives, and we just keep doing what we're doing. And sometimes, we get over here and then we're like, how did I get over here? And is this really where I wanted to be? And again, like I used to feel a sense of like purpose and meaning and contribution and significance and all the things, but like I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't know where I am with any of those things right now. Like, I just don't feel like really solid as much anymore. So again, today we're just going to be diving in to this topic. So again, grab your drink, get cozy, and let's get started. Finding a new purpose in a new season of life essentially is kind of what we're going to be talking about. And again, what gives your life meaning today, right? Life is going to bring change, like we talked about, through retirement, through loss. And that loss doesn't just have to be, loss of a loved one, loss of a family member. There's all kinds of losses, especially, all of us that have here in the St. Louis area. We had the tornado that came through about a year ago. And so I know a lot of you have, unfortunately, lost, literally some of your housing or some stable housing options, etc. And, it's been really, really tricky. So, loss can mean a lot of different things. Can mean loss of a job, loss of our independence, loss of us being able to drive anymore, etc. Can be illness or isolation. So, again, whatever you're feeling, just please know, you're not alone. And today we're going to give you some tips and tricks to navigate through this. Okay, so let's start with a simple question. Why does this matter? So, in that scenario, if you just stop for a moment and think about it, like it turns out again, our purpose isn't just like a nice idea that we talk about in greeting cards or, that we talk about with other people for our life goals and things that we want to accomplish, etc. It has real measurable effects on our life. So first, purpose improves our emotional and our physical health. So, research has shown again and again that people who feel a sense of purpose tend to sleep better. They definitely manage stress more effectively. And in some studies, they even live longer. And I would absolutely agree with this. So, when we wake up, with a reason to get out of bed, even a small one, our mood lifts and our whole outlook can brighten. Second, purpose strengthens our resilience in times of change. And again, like we just talked about, let's be honest, this is definitely a season where life is going to bring a lot of change, especially for us as we age. So, we have to have something that helps to ground us, and we better be equipped to weather the storms instead of, just break. So, let's talk honestly also too about some of the barriers, because purpose doesn't always come easily in this season of life. And again, loneliness and grief can settle in, especially after losing a spouse, a close friend, maybe even like a caregiver, somebody that was supporting you before in the past might move out of the area. A lot of times too, we forget that, people age and pass, yes, but for so many people, they've also had pets that have been around their whole lives or for a really long time, that they've also grown older with their pets as their pets have grown older. And so sometimes, again, like the pet can pass. And so, our daily routines also, those changing that we once relied on, we also sometimes need to grieve the loss of that. Mobility limitations that can set in as we age can make us feel cut off from the people and activities we love, since getting out of the house isn't always like just a simple, easy thing anymore. And, and especially for our clients and people that we support, as disabled persons also, this, mobility limitations for some people, again, can really become like who they are instead of it just being like one little piece. Some people will honestly like start to define their whole entire life, their whole entire persona, their whole entire emotional, mental, physical reality, like on that one piece of information. And again, as we go through this, we'll unpack some of it a little more, but just remember, like, that's just one little piece, one little sliver. of what's happening in your world. That's not, who you are. That doesn't define you. So feeling needless also too, I think is something that a lot of people experience after retirement or after children grow up and move away. And, a lot of people feel that loss of, them being needed and them helping, people relying on them, etc. And sometimes that can honestly be one of the hardest parts of aging, especially because in our society, especially back in the day, before all this fancy, spancy technology that we have nowadays, and all the AI stuff that we have, it can be tricky because because one of the things is that I guess one of the things that can happen is that as again, like as people age, in the past, what you would do if you needed help with something or you had a question about your car or whatever that was, you would go to one of the neighbors, and you would ask the neighbor, like, hey, can you come over and help me, whatever it was, can you help me with this ladder and help me get the leaves out of my gutter, or can you help me unclog this drain, or, whatever it is. Or you would call, one of your parents or something. And so they, or somebody else that was older than you that knew the answers to these questions, right? Before we had Google, we had people. And so you would ask people. But now, a lot of times, for literally everything, from financial concerns to health concerns, how to do something, how to put something together, how to fix something. Nowadays, a lot of times, especially with, the younger generations, they'll just Google something or they'll look it up on AI. They'll watch a YouTube video on it. There's an app about it, whatever it is. They'll connect with something that way and get the answer quick, fast, instead of reaching out and asking, a real person. And so sometimes that can leave us, especially if we're older, that can leave us feeling, not needed, not wanted, and not useful. And so sometimes you really, can start to feel a little more isolated because there's fewer opportunities now to connect socially like that as well. So if you felt any of these things, again, please know it's common, it's human. And it does not mean that your life has lost meaning. It simply means that we need to look for purpose in ways to connect and ways to provide value, etc., in new ways. And that's exactly what we are going to be doing next. So, rediscovering joy and identity. I think a huge key takeaway here is, again, it's never too late to begin. So, reconnecting with life's meaning happens through three simple things: creativity, connection, and purpose. So, let's walk through 6 meaningful ways to rediscover joy and identity in this season of life. And again, these are just some ideas for you. But first, hobbies and creativity. So, think back. I want to challenge you here for a second. So, think back at what you loved to do before life got really busy, or maybe before life got really shuffled around and kind of disconnected from you, for you also too, to where you kind of feel like now, like you're on your own by yourself. So maybe, did you like painting, gardening? Maybe you played an instrument. Maybe even, you wrote letters, like you wrote handwritten letters to people to check on them and, see how they're doing, and you mailed them in the actual mail. But creativity, doesn't just require talent, only curiosity. And that's the biggest thing to remember. There's no wrong way to create something that really like brings you joy. Secondly, is volunteering and mentoring. And, we talked about this just a second ago, but again, the older you are, the more cool stuff that the more of a resource you are, the more information you have that you're able, honestly, to share and pass down. to others. And it's just such a beautiful gift that you have. So, there's something powerful about, again, about sharing and about being needed and about being helpful. So, things that you can do potentially would be like volunteering at a food pantry, a library, even like a school, helping to like read to children, or animal shelters, etc., but can put us back in connection really like with our community. And again, mentoring is its very own gift. Sharing your life experience and what you know and your knowledge with someone younger, again, just can really remind you how much wisdom that you really carry, which is just, I think, is just absolutely beautiful. Third is going to be your faith and spirituality. For many of us, faith, especially as we age, can be a really steady anchor. So whether that means, attending, like church services or something like that, spirituality services, praying quietly at home, or simply spending time just in reflection, meditating, etc., spiritual practice can offer comfort, community, and deep meaning, especially when things are changing. It can really help to kind of ground you and just kind of bring you back to center. Fourth, learning new skills. So our minds are capable of growth at every age. So taking a class, learning a new language, or figuring out, a new piece of technology, like I did a presentation the other day about different kinds of senior technologies, apps, etc., that are out there. Go check that one out if you haven't yet, but that would be a good one to plug into for this piece. But, there's different kinds of technology. And, every new skill is proof that we are learning and still capable and still becoming more and still have the ability to grow and expand. Fifth is building routines. Simple daily rhythms give our day shape and also structure. And, it could be a simple like morning walk, even just, 10 minutes up and down the street, or a regular phone call with a friend to check in the morning, a weekly visit to a favorite coffee shop, or, just going outside and sitting and reading and listening to the birds, in the afternoon or evening. These small routines aren't boring, but like they're anchoring and they're really, again, like key and important for a lot of people. And then six is going to be setting personal goals. So this one I think is just super fascinating because, a lot of times, again, like we thought when we were younger, okay, like, what's my goals? What's my, it's New Year's. And then you write, what's the plans for this year? What are you going to accomplish? What do you want to do this year, etc. But at some point, a lot of people, like, especially I think for a lot of people where this kind of falls off, I'm going to say, is kind of when they stop working, when they retire. But goals, the biggest thing to remember is like they're not just for the young. So maybe it might be reading 12 books a year or visiting a place every month that you've always wanted to see or that you've always wanted to check out, or a food place that you've always wanted to eat at. Maybe you do that once a month, or simply calling one friend once a week that you've lost touch with. But small goals can give us something to look forward to and something to be proud of. Maybe you're going to finally write the book that you've always wanted to write, or maybe you want to write a book specifically for one of your grandkids or something like that. And maybe, you can write a chapter a week or something. But you can definitely, implement some of these different things. And, one of the things I want you guys to remember is like every step forward, no matter how small, is a step towards a fuller, more meaningful life. And again, you don't have to do all six of these things, especially not all at the same time, but even one of these is a great place to start. So what I would challenge you is to, kind of, again, like we're gonna pause for a second here, just look at this screen. And I want you to think about, maybe your top three. Like what would be the top one you think you would need to work on? Number one, and then what would be like a number two? And then what would be like a number three? And, again, just kind of look at those and start there. Those small steps toward a meaningful life. Let's talk about how do we actually put this stuff into practice? Because again, inspiration is wonderful. But action is what really changes our life. And you guys have heard me say this, like, I feel like a million bajillion times now, but I'm going to say it a lot more and I'm going to keep saying it. But motion, right, creates emotion. So as you start taking these little steps and putting these little things into actual practice, the action also is going to help change your emotional state, can help change, you mentally, physically, all the things as well, which is beautiful. Start small with meaningful daily activities. You do not need to reinvent your whole entire life overnight. In fact, please don't try to. As we talked about on the previous slide, just start with one small thing, or a few small things. So it might be like watering a plant. Maybe you get a plant and then you'll water it. Or maybe you're going to grow some tomatoes in a pail or something like that. Do that. Or take a short walk. Call one person maybe. But small doable actions help to build momentum. And momentum over time will help to build meaning. Join groups or classes to build social connection. So isolation is one of the biggest challenges in the season of life, but it also has one of the simplest remedies. You just got to show up. You got to show up for yourself and you got to show up for people around you. And that could look like a local exercise class, maybe joining a book club or a card game group. You don't need to know anyone there at all before you walk in the door. Everyone in that room started at one point as a stranger and they knew no one else potentially in the room also. And so that's, I think the key takeaway is that, I know a lot of times, even for people, trying to start a program like Silver Sneakers or something like that, it can feel overwhelming and kind of anxiety producing and scary and intimidating because, again, maybe you don't know anybody. And so you're a little anxious about it, about being judged, or are they going to like you? Are you going to say the right thing? Are you not wearing the right thing? Or maybe they had a different life than you had. Maybe they grew up different. They had a different background, etc. Or a different way they lived their life. And so sometimes, again, people can kind of be fearful a little bit of that judgment. But, the biggest thing is to remember, like, everyone was a stranger. And a lot of times those groups of people are actually some of the most accepting people that are out there because they've all been, in your shoes before in the past. So that leads us to reconnect with friends and family regularly. So relationships can take more intention as we get older, and that's all right. That's just what it is sometimes. So you have to do your part. You got to pick up the phone, send a card, maybe like we talked about earlier, you do a handwritten letter, plan a regular visit. Even 5 minutes of real connection with someone who loves you can absolutely shift your entire day. Serve others in a simple, meaningful way. So this might be one of the most powerful of all. Helping someone else, even in a small way, helps to pull us out of our own mind and our own thoughts that can just ruminate in our head. And it helps us to pull us out then too, like of our own worries, and really reminds us again of our value and our meaning and what we know and what we can share and the significance that we still have. Maybe that looks like you bake something for a neighbor. Again, you write a letter to someone who you think might be lonely. Offer to help with a task that's hard for somebody else, potentially, that again you might be good at. So look at this image with me for 1 second. An older couple here, they're sitting together outdoors, hand resting gently on the shoulder, but this is what meaningful living looks like. It doesn't have to be like grand gestures of, really elaborate things or expensive things. It doesn't have to be, going all out on trips all over the place or, roaming around town everywhere. A lot of times it can be just sitting with someone and just being present. and talking and listening and checking in on someone, and just having a real, regular, conversation. Those things can absolutely be key. And I think something else too that is really important, again, as we look at this too, the serving others in simple ways, but also how can we show up for different people in our lives, right? Friends, family, if we, still have, someone in our life that we have, like a romantic kind of, relationship with, like a partner, our spouse or something like that. Also too is just being mindful as well of what that person's love language is. And love languages are really quite fun because, again, for some people, um like you know like touch is important. Other people, quality time is important. So there's different aspects and different ways that different people like to connect. Acts of service might be one, for example. So again, there's different ways that people, give, like, I don't want to say like give love, but there's different ways that people show up, right, for others. And also there's different ways that people like to, to have people show up for them. And how give isn't, we'll call it, giving, but like how you give and what love language per se it is, that's are your two, two or three primary ones. But like how you give might not be the same as how you need to receive. So, and another example that could be, is like words of affirmation. But so what that might look like is, like this couple here, like for her spending, one of her top love languages and ways to connect might be like spending quality time, for example. But one of her top needs that she has receiving might actually be words of affirmation. So again, that might be, again, them spending time together, but then she might also need to hear from him that, like, wow, I really love your outfit today. Or, thank you so much for baking me that pie. That was, that it tasted amazing. That was absolutely incredible. And the baking of the pie example, that could be like doing an acts of service. So maybe like, he helps do the laundry or something like that. And so that would be like an act of service for her. And that is a meaningful way that, he can show up maybe for her that she really finds value in. That's, that's helpful to her, which is pretty neat. So I would just, challenge you also and implore you to explore, look up different love languages. And there's also little, love language tests and things like that that you can take as well. But look at, what are some of, again, your top ways that that you show up for others and you give. And then also look at some of the top ways that you like to receive. And again, those always aren't going to be the same things. Okay, so next thing we are going to look at here is, just some local resources. And from a local resource standpoint, it could be, just community centers. And there's also a lot of really great senior clubs and senior centers. And you'll find a lot of the senior centers. We have a lot of them actually around the city of St. Louis. But even some of the smaller kind of outlying towns will also usually now have senior centers. And that's kind of a growing trend and a growing thing that we see. And it's wonderful. And they're a great place to start because many of them offer classes and they have social events. You can go and do meals there. And they have a lot of activities too, designed specifically for this season of life. And some might even have transportation getting there if that's a concern. Some of your senior centers or community centers as well are a great place to connect to if you are having transportation challenges, trying to get like to and from doctor's appointments maybe, or, different events or things like that in your life as well. They can sometimes be a great place to reach out to for getting connected to other resources, like that. Or maybe you need, again, somebody to come in the home and help with some type of care, or you need some type of care like with your pet or something like that. But again, senior centers, community centers are great for that. Also, again, some of these places too will host you've heard me say this again, also a million bajillion times, but some of the silver sneakers classes that you guys can also plug into, which are phenomenal. Usually, a lot of the centers like this as well, or the clubs, will also sometimes have social workers or care managers, case managers, etc. Different people like that sometimes that can be connected to them. That can be, again, like great resources for all kinds of different things that you might need, from like housing, food support, electric support, water, heat, sewer, all the different things that you could potentially need. So a lot of times they're a great place and a great hub kind of to start as a good springboard to getting going with some of the different resources and tools that you might need. So volunteer groups and faith-based organizations are also ready to welcome you with open arms typically. So local churches or synagogues, mosques, and community volunteer groups also have different built-in ways for you to connect and serve and belong. And kind of back to what we were talking about earlier, I want you guys with this right here, like the volunteer part, etc. too, is, just take a pause for a second. And I want you to think about, again, like what activities or hobbies or things like that did you used to enjoy? Did you used to like doing? Maybe, for example, you used to play the guitar or you used to play the piano. You could absolutely like volunteer at a music shop or for, your church or with, the school to help do music lessons or piano lessons, guitar lessons, whatever, for youth or other adults maybe, and that can be just like so much fun, especially plugging into, again, something that you loved and that you're passionate about, and again, obviously, like, you're going to be an expert in and you're going to know about, and being able to share that gift with someone else can be really, really cool. So they have, again, like just different built-in, usually like part of these organizations, they have different ways that you can kind of jump in and help serve, which is nice. And again, I want to encourage you, just reach out. The first thing might just be like a phone call, or just walk through that door that's kind of unfamiliar. And again, that can feel like the hardest part sometimes, but on the other side of that awkwardness feeling is the first step to connection for you, and purpose, and people who are genuinely glad and happy that you show up. And you're not, again, meant to walk through this season alone whatsoever. So in closing, I would like to leave you guys with this quote from Gandhi. And he said, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." And when you take a moment and you sit with that, so much of finding purpose, again, isn't about looking inward for hours on it. A lot of times it's about, pausing again and turning outward and turning towards others and toward connection and towards small acts of love and service. And again, different ways that you can show up for other people in your world and that surround you. And, whether you're, in this new season of life, or, you're feeling steady, you're feeling good, you're feeling sure, and you have, some good footing, or again, you might be still searching for your footing. And things might be a little rocky. They might feel a little lonely, but either way, again, I hope you leave here today with this thought. I want you guys to find peace. I want you to find purpose, and I want you to try to find joy. And again, ways to show up for others and for yourself in this new season of life. So Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And, I just would love you guys to follow us, follow Aging Advantage on Facebook and subscribe to the YouTube channel where we are able to share presentations like this and to help you guys navigate through all the different seasons of life that you might be working with. So anyways, thank you guys again, and until next time, again, take care of yourselves, each other, but also, again, be aware of what brings you joy, and be aware of ways that you can show up for yourself and for others around you, and just take care of each other. So we will see you guys next time. Thanks.